Hello, all you Super Cinema brothers and Super Cinema sisters out there. It's me again, Zach Berman, with my co host.
Ethan Berman.
And today we will be talking about Snowpiercer.
Woo!
Now, Snowpiercer.
Choo-choo.
Now, Snowpiercer is a 2013 movie based on a French graphic novel that I'm not going to try to pronounce. But it's interesting because it is a Korean movie based on a French comic book, and I think it was co-produced with a Czech company.
And it's made entirely in English. Or not entirely, but mostly.
Yeah,
I think it's
mostly English.
70 or 75% of the dialogue is English.
Yeah, and it's from one of my favorite directors, Bong Joon-Ho.
Of Parasite fame.
Yes.
Recently.
And unfortunately, you and I already watched Parasite
yeah.
a few months ago, and so it won't be on the podcast anytime soon. I'm thinking we can do every once in a while something that we already watched together.
And then we can just discuss it.
Yeah, because there's a lot to talk about Parasite. And really all of his movies. I've seen The Host, which is like a monster movie.
Which is going to be in this. It's in the hat, right? Or it will be?
It will be eventually.
Okay.
I didn't want to risk doing two movies by the same director so close to each other.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so we got The Host, Snowpiercer, Okja, and Parasite. And they're all good, but I think Parasite's definitely his best. I'd put this one at number 2, though.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I watched it when it first came up on Netflix, because I think it went around to, like, festivals and stuff. I don't remember it having a theatrical run. Or at least not a full release. But yeah, it's really something special.
It is.
So let's just jump into it then. Basically, it opens up with news broadcasts about climate change and attempts to beat it, and that one of their attempts failed, and basically the entire Earth is a snow globe. Everything is covered.
Yeah, everything got frozen and everybody died.
Yeah, several feet of snow. Except for one train, and that's where we're introduced to Curtis, played by Chris Evans.
Yeah.
And they live in the back of the train, the very tail end.
The slums.
Yeah, it's a shithole.
It's real bad.
It's not good. They're all, like, crammed together and, like, They live on, like, stacked bunk beds, and there's no room for anybody to even move, barely.
And the interesting thing about it is that it's 17 years since the world froze over in this. And they mention that there were a lot more people in the rear end of the car, of the train,
Oh, yeah.
way before. So it is really crammed in right now.
And we'll really get into the consequences of that later on. But we're sort of introduced to them as they're being fed, where they all crowd together and everyone's counted, so everybody gets one protein block. It's like Jell-O, but disgusting.
Yeah.
It just looks awful. And we're also introduced to, what's his name? Gilliam, who is John Hurt.
Yeah.
And he's scruffy looking old man he's missing a leg. He's got a peg leg, and he's got an arm that is made of, like, a coat hanger and a walking cane.
Yep. Like a little hook.
He's got a little hook hand.
And then he walks with a crutch that the end has been broken off, and they took an old pipe and attached it to the bottom.
It's really good costume design. You look at him, and it's just a treat to look at.
Yeah.
That's a lot of this movie is really good set design and costume design, and the characters really pop. You know who's supposed to be important.
Yeah.
They all stick out. And so you get the idea that they're sort of planning something. First, Chris Evans, like, obsessively, for some reason, wants this kid's protein block.
And also, whenever they're doing the counting, he is counting the number of seconds between when the doors open and close beyond the rear end during the security checkpoints.
Yeah, you get to see that because he refuses to kneel.
Yeah, he refuses to kneel, and when the food is happening, it's a really interesting thing because you get to see the dynamic between him and the other guy whose name I can't remember. Edgar, where Chris Evans won't kneel whenever they're doing the head count because he's counting the number of seconds he needs to be able to see past the doors. But later, when something happens and they're like beating on someone or something, oh yeah, it's whenever they take the person for the violinist. They beat up the woman.
Oh yeah, they come in and say that they're looking for someone who can play violin, and there's two of them in their couple.
Yeah.
And they just take one of them, the man, away.
Yeah.
And
so Edgar stands up and he's gonna try to go like fight the guys, and Curtis he tries to stop him. And so you see the interesting thing there where Curtis is he only wants to do something that will benefit the long-term plan that he has.
Yeah, it's establishing him as the leader figure.
Exactly.
Even though he insists that it's John Hurt.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he's pestering the kid for his protein block, and the kid doesn't want to give it up. He's, like, playing a game, and he wants to have a little soccer ball.
Yeah.
So he trades his and the soccer ball for this kid's thing, but you find out there's a little capsule inside. And he gets them, and they all have individual words on them. Like at one point it says like fire and then blood.
Yeah.
And we don't know who is sending them.
Yeah, I think this one is a name.
Yes, I believe.
It's the name of the guy who we learn is a security expert.
Yes.
Who's currently imprisoned.
Oh gosh, what's his name? Namgung.
Yeah. I was reading stuff about this. That name was specifically chosen to be the most difficult for a non-Korean speaker to say.
It might be Namgung. I don't know.
But that's why I think it was Bong Joon-Ho chose that name. He's like, I wanted it to be the most difficult for somebody who does not speak to Korean to say it.
Actually, I'd be willing to bet money because Harvey Weinstein is notorious for many things, but in the business, he's notorious for constantly trying to cut the shit out of movies.
Yeah.
He had a problem with early on, what was it? I think it was with Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, where he kept telling Hayao Miyazaki that he wanted to make all these cuts to it when they brought it to America.
Yeah.
And his response was to send him in a katana that said no cuts.
That's amazing.
Yeah, there were a lot of production issues, so I'd be willing to bet that it wasn't just to be the hardest word for us to pronounce, but specifically the hardest name for Weinstein to pronounce. But thank God he's not ruining movies and doing his serial killer stuff, because he was a creepy man who does a lot of bad things.
He's the worst kind of man.
Yeah, but yeah, this was a Weinstein picture, unfortunately. But Bong Joon-Ho didn't stand for it. He was like, no, I want to make this movie the way... He wanted to cut like 25 minutes of dialogue. And there's like huge chunks of this movie where the dialogue is what is interesting.
Yeah.
That's how you understand the world a little bit better. You can show a lot, but there are times where you have to understand the dynamics between the rich people and how they look at the poor people. And
yeah, that's really important for this movie. A lot of this movie relies on your understanding of like the class structure.
Yeah, there's specifically several monologues towards the end that I bet. Before we get to it, I bet he probably wrote less talking, more punching Ed Harris in the face. But what we got feels like something it feels like a Bong Joon-Ho movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
His movies do have a lot of dialogue sometimes. A lot of people talking about their feelings or their perspective. But because The Host is a monster movie with really very little monster in it. It's a lot like some of the older Godzilla movies, where there's a story going on beyond just a giant monster attacking everybody.
Yeah.
But anyway, we find out that they are planning a revolt. That's why he was, reading the thing and counting how long it takes for the doors to close and at what points they're open. And it ends up being where they have 3 doors in a row that are all open at the same time for 4 seconds.
Yeah. And they collect as many barrels as they can from the back end, which involves there are barrels where people just keep their stuff. There are barrels where people like cook in them.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's barrels where that's where children sleep, but they have to get them all bolt them all together to be like a battering ram, so that or like a blockade kind of thing where they run through and then keep all the doors open at the same time.
Yeah, it's a pretty clever idea.
Yeah.
And it's a cool visual because they're just you have a dozen people, not even 24 people, all carrying this massive battering ram thing through these doors so they can get them open so everybody can get out. But we are introduced to Tilda Swinton's character, whose name is Mason, I believe.
Yes.
And she might be the best character in the movie.
She is very good.
She's got weird costume and she's got these weird glasses and she doesn't look like she's from this future post-apocalyptic world. She looks like she's from the 60s or something. And we learn that occasionally they come and they just take children.
Yeah. And they come in and measure the heights of the children and then take them up to the front. And so you don't really know what that's for. It's weird, but it causes problems with one guy. I think his name is Andrew.
Yeah,
and then I can't remember.
He tries to stand up to them, and then the way they punish him is horrific.
Yeah,
but really interesting.
They open up a little porthole in the side of the train. They stick his hand out for a few 7 minutes, which is long enough to freeze it solid, and then they take a giant hammer and crush it.
Yeah, and while they're doing this, Tilda Swinton fills the 7 minutes of time by monologuing about how everybody needs to be in their place that is predetermined. It's your destiny to be in the back of the train because they are a shoe, and the shoe doesn't belong on the head, it belongs on the foot.
And she does this really weird hand motion of pushing something forward and twisting it and then pulling it back out and twisting it and that weird thing, which I thought that was just a weird mannerism, but it actually becomes kind of a thing later.
Yeah, but at first you're just it helps to establish that the rest of humanity functions like a cult.
Yeah.
Almost. It's more of a tyranny, dictatorship kind of thing, but you get the feeling she's given this speech before because she just has it ready.
Yeah.
And then the weird hand gesture, and it gets real culty later on. But yeah, so we've got that, and then is this when they learn the next time they come that the guns have no ammo?
Yes, because it's when something happens and I can't remember exactly what triggers it, but somebody it's when John Hurt starts to walk up to her and he's talking to her and stuff, and the guards point their guns at him and she says, "Put your useless guns away." And that is what makes Curtis realize that they're out of bullets. They ran out of bullets during the last revolution.
Yeah, this is the third one.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes him say, okay, now's the time. We know how long the doors are open. We know which ones are open. We have enough people, and we know that their guns are unloaded. So the next time they come around, they bust through them with that giant battering ram and make it through to, what's the first place they go to? Where they make the
because they skip over. No, they skip over all of the security stuff and go immediately to the prison car.
Yes, and that's where they find what was his name again? Namgung.
Namgung and his daughter.
Yes, and her name is Yona.
Yeah, and so they.
And they're junkies.
Yeah, they're junkies.
He's a security expert.
Yeah, he's the one who designed all the doors or the gates on the train, as they like to be called. But he designed them all, and so he agrees to open the doors for them on the condition that each time he opens a door, he and his daughter get a block of, what's it called? Chronal, which is just like...
It looks like charcoal, basically.
It's industrial waste.
Yeah.
That is, they say, is extremely flammable, and it's like a hallucinogen. And so every time they open a door, they get some chronal.
Yeah, and it's kind of established that she is clairvoyant, but it never really has any impact on anything.
Yeah,
which is strange to me.
It's the first door. She looks at it and says, "Nobody's on the other side." And then at a door later, she says, "Don't open it," right before it opens, and there's a crowd of people. But it doesn't really come up again, except for, I think it does once before the end. I don't think it was necessary for that to be the reason why the thing at the end happens, but I'll talk about it when we get there.
Yeah, and so after this, I think they end up in the room where they make the blocks of protein.
Yeah,
there's a guy there
who was originally part of the back.
Yeah, and he had been taken.
Yeah,
and now they're keeping him, and he's crazy now. It's implied that he doesn't have any human contact whatsoever. He just runs the machine that makes the protein blocks. And that's where we find out that the protein blocks are just bugs.
Crushed up bugs put in a gelatin.
Yeah, they grind them up and they come out in blocks, and it's pretty disgusting, to be honest.
But also, when you're watching, you're like, yeah, what else would it be?
Yeah,
it's like the only thing it could be.
Yeah, I remember thinking that would be a bigger twist, but that is not what the movie's about.
But yeah, so but Curtis finds out about it, and everybody finds the protein blocks, and they get super excited, and they start eating them. Meanwhile, Curtis looks in the giant vat to see bugs just getting crushed up, and he's like, nope, we're not going to show them that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, people are stuffing their faces.
He's like, I'm going to take this to the grave, because we don't need a whole bunch of people vomiting in the train. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then we get to, I think it's is this when they made it to the water room?
No, they don't make it to the water room until after the fight.
Okay, so now we're in the axe fight.
Yeah, it's just a giant empty. She says, "Don't open the door." Right before the door opens, you find a bunch of guys either in tactical gear or in full hoods and butcher's bibs and shit.
Yeah.
With axes. Yeah,
and then the one part of the movie that I still don't get, I have ideas about it, but the fish thing. They pass a fish up to the guy in the front, and he guts it with the axe, and then he covers his axe in blood, and then he passes it around so other people can do the same thing. And I'm not entirely sure. Think it's just an intimidation thing.
I think there's a few ideas I've had. Most of them are just an intimidation thing. Part of me thought it was like, hey, look, this axe is really sharp, or something. I thought it could also be, other than the bugs that they just saw, that is the first type of real quote-unquote food that they've seen in a long time. And I think it's kind of a, hey, look, this doesn't mean anything to us.
Yeah.
We're just going to cut it up right in front of you.
Yeah, so I think it also, because it's not uncommon, I'm going to gut you like a fish.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just them literally
gutting a fish then being that's you. But I feel like it's one of those things.
Yeah, but it actually, I have another theory later on. They go to the aquarium car.
Yeah.
And they talk about how it's a specific ecosystem.
A closed ecosystem.
So I think it's them saying, like, this fish is you.
Oh, yeah, because it does turn around at the end where they mention that the whole train is just like the aquarium. The whole train is a closed ecosystem.
So it might be that.
But
it also could be dipping all their axes in the blood. Could be a sort of, if everybody's got axe on their blood, and blood on their axe, then you can't tell who has murdered someone or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they end up having a pretty cool fight in this train car.
And it seems to be going somewhat well for the rebels for a bit until
it gets dark.
They stop. Tilda Swinton gives a little bit of a speech, and then all of the bad guys pull out night vision goggles.
And they go through a tunnel. Yeah, so now everybody's just flailing their axes around. And at some point, they end up in a situation where Edgar is in trouble. And Curtis basically has to decide, do I kill, or do I get Mason? Or do I save Edgar? And he makes the tough choice.
He makes the tough choice that I think is probably the right choice.
Yeah.
But yeah, he throws a knife at Tilda Swinton and then goes and grabs her. Meanwhile, Edgar is slaughtered.
Yeah, and that sort of ends the fight because he's like, I'll kill her.
Yeah.
And everybody stands down.
Yeah,
but
Tilda Swinton tells him to stand down.
Edgar is a casualty.
Yeah.
And so now they make it into... Now are they in the...
Now they're in the water.
Yeah, and that's where they think they can get an advantage. And Tilda Swinton's like, no. I think the implication is that there's more water on the train than just...
Yeah, because she mentions this is... the water is collected at the front of the train.
Yeah, so...
So they can get their own water supply. It won't be as, like, pure or anything, but they can find a way to get their own water supply up at the front.
Yeah, so they do not have the strategic advantage that they thought they did.
Yeah, and...
They have to keep moving forward.
Although, something real quick we didn't point out is whenever they're in the fight scene area, whenever they stop in the middle of the fight before they go in the tunnel, and they have, like, everybody stops fighting for a little bit as they go over a bridge that marks the new year, and so everybody stops for a little bit, and that is where security man, can't remember his name, points something out to his daughter down below, and at that point I don't think we really know. Do we see the plane? I think it shows us the plane, but we don't really know what it means.
Yeah, we don't know what it means other than, like, there's a plane there.
Yeah,
from like earlier,
and he mentions something about he knows it's there. It seems like his daughter knows something about it, and this is the first time he's showing it to her.
Yeah, and then he also has the little snowflake that comes in.
That's later.
Oh, okay.
That's during the gunshot part.
Oh, yeah.
The John Wick part.
Yeah, and so, is this where they go to the sushi?
Yes, this is where they decide to split up.
And they go to the aquarium room.
They go to the greenhouse, but it's specifically they split up the group. They take just Curtis, Mason, Andrew, Gray, and Octavia Spencer's character.
Yes. So they go through the greenhouse, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that is the aquarium, and they are serving sushi.
Yes.
And so everybody is like, oh my god, I get to try real food. And
this is where Mason talks all about how it's a closed ecosystem and how they have to keep everything precise and how they need to, if they need to kill some people to keep balance or kill some fish or something.
Yeah, and so that's when they have the sushi.
Again, I forgot to mention something earlier. During the fight, whenever she gives her speech, she says something about how the number is 75%. She says the number is still 75%, and something about that's how many of you need to die.
Yes, and So there's a lot of talk of this throughout the movie, of everything being in its place. Everything needs to. Sometimes there has to be like a culling. So you make the sushi with the fish, and then they make. While they're enjoying the sushi, they make her eat one of the
Protein blocks.
protein blocks. It's a pretty gross scene
Mm-hmm.
because she already has all this crazy like gross makeup going on, and
She's already a very gross person.
you have the contrast between the sushi and the disgusting protein block because it's gross, but the sushi looks delicious. It's like colorful and
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. And then I think this is where we make it to the school.
Yes, we make it to the school at this point.
What a scene!
Ugh.
They're all like, oh man. So the teacher will be like, the engine is sacred. It gives life and it keeps everything in balance. And she's like, what happens if the engine goes out? They're like, we all freeze and die. What if something happens to what's the leader's name? I keep forgetting.
Oh,
his
Wilford.
name. What if something happens to Wilford? We all freeze and die. And they start singing like hymns to him.
Yeah.
And she's like playing the piano, and she is like zoning out. A teacher, and
Whose character name is Pregnant Teacher.
pregnant teacher, really?
That is what she is in. That is what she is called in the credits.
Interesting.
Which, interestingly, it's not like capitalized or anything, so that's not like a name. But we eventually get introduced to another character who has another similar name to that, but it is capitalized, so it's like, oh hey, this is this person's name. We just didn't learn the pregnant teacher's name. She's just referred to as that.
And then, in order to celebrate the new year, which is another circle around the earth, basically, they bring in a bunch of eggs.
And we meet the guy whose name is Egghead.
Egghead? Like Batman?
Because he has alopecia.
Oh, yeah, he does.
And he has the eggs, so he's called Egghead. That's his name. It's capitalized. But something else interesting that I was reading about is that Bong Joon-Ho has said in interviews that Wilford is bisexual and has had sex with the woman who steals the children for him, Mason, the pregnant teacher, and the egghead.
So basically every character who's not one of the tail ends.
One of the tail ends, or like the assassins who we meet later. Or actually we already met, but...
Wait, is he the dad of the pregnant
It's
teachers?
implied.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. But inside one of the eggs is another little piece of paper.
And I think that one says blood.
Blood. And then they pull out machine guns. Turns out they do have some ammo.
Yeah. So, pregnant teacher kills Andrew, the guy with one arm whose son got kidnapped. Egghead kills all of the people who were in the water area and frees all of the prisoners, including the assassin guy.
Yes, and then is this when Curtis ends up killing Mason.
He does that after he sees Egghead kill John Hurt.
Yes.
Kill Gillian.
Man, it's a bloodbath.
Yeah.
Is Octavia Spencer still alive at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
And also, it's at this point, a little bit before this, that Mason starts to talk to Curtis about helping him to overthrow Wilford. And it's at this point, whenever she sees John Hurt die, that she's like, I can help you, and then gets shot in the head by Curtis.
And then that's where they've got her like enforcer is still alive.
Yeah, that guy. One of the two. The
Yeah.
other one killed.
And he's injured but not killed.
Not yet. He just got freed, and so he starts to make his way to the front.
Yeah, and so they end up just going through some more. Not much happens at this point. They go through some more train cars just to give an idea of sort of the world. Like there's a nightclub.
There's a nightclub where security guy steals a bunch more chronal and steals like some coats and shit, and then they go through like a dentist car and like a doctor's office,
Oh yeah.
and they go through all these fancy bars and stuff, and then eventually they get to another car that's just essentially empty with just some windows, and this is where you finally really get to see how long the train is. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
at this point that
The shootout.
yes, the shootout happens where
I checked. The guy's name is Franco, the enforcer.
Franco the enforcer, he makes it to the classroom car, and he sees that they are turning around in like a corkscrew fashion on the track, and so he has a shot towards the windows, and so he starts shooting out the car into the other car, and so they start shooting at each other.
At different ends of the train. It's great.
Different ends of the train, super far away. Their weapons are not accurate at this range, so they're barely hitting anything. But you also see here where Franco has some guys with them, and they're like, "Hey, don't do this. You'll freeze us to death." And he just like decks him in the face or something. He's like, "I don't care. I'm going to kill this person."
Yeah, he's a little pissed off
Yeah.
throughout this movie.
But this is where you see from one of the bullet holes in the window, a little snowflake flies in and flies over security guy's face.
Yes, and they really like hold on that, so you get.
Yeah, they make
You don't
that
understand
a big
what
deal.
it means yet.
No, but you know it is a big deal.
But yes, and so not much really happens. It's just a lot of two people shooting at each other and missing.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty tense scene, and it's got some cool visuals. There's not a whole lot of CGI in the movie, really. Everything in the train is sets.
Yeah.
It's the outside. And it looks good. It's like really cool visuals for the insanely long train because it holds all of humanity.
Yeah. And by the way, whenever I said earlier the John Wick scene, I thought I called it, I meant this, which was, it's like the scene from John Wick 2 where they're in like the subway station.
Oh yeah.
And he's down below and the guy's up on the walkway and they start like shooting their super suppressor guns at each other and nobody notices the gunshots.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
But like
it is a lot like that.
Yeah.
I wonder if they were inspired by it.
And
Yeah,
then
so where do they go next?
I think they just go to the sauna.
And that's where they meet up with Franco again?
I think this is where they go through the nightclubs. I think it was like more of the fancier bars and like the living areas as they move through. Then they get to the shootout scene, and then they move through the nightclubs, and that's where they start to slow down a bit as he starts to steal a bunch of chronal. And so Franco has a chance to catch up to them.
Yes.
And then they get to, that would make sense because that's where the hot tubs are. It's nightclub, hot tub, sauna.
Yes.
And so they get to the sauna, which is a bunch of like little cabinets.
He kills some random people because he's trying to find where Curtis is hiding. He shoots one of them and he's like, just don't mention this to anyone.
Yeah. And
so he's checking each one.
He's checking each one, can't find anything until he eventually finds this random woman who Curtis is hiding behind. And then they have a fight where Octavia Spencer and Gray end up dying.
Yes.
And then he gets slashed in the side and falls unconscious. Franco does. And so now it's just...
The guy can't die.
No. So now it's just Curtis, security guy, and his daughter.
I like the little detail. He keeps like flipping his hair back.
Yeah.
Every time. But now we're basically at the end of the train.
Yeah, we've
made it through the whole thing.
Like the it's not the engine, but it's basically the engine. It looks like I described it as a video game where there's a bridge going over like these big turning gears.
Oh yeah, I said it looks like a set from Star Wars.
Yeah, it looks like either a set from Star Wars or a video game where they have this long thin bridge that goes over these exposed giant gears for some reason. Why not just have a bigger bridge that you don't even have a risk of falling in?
Because it looks cool. It's like glowing.
Yeah, and also so it serves as a bottleneck later.
Yeah, and so this is where everything slows down.
Yeah, it's where they get to the final gate, and so Curtis is like, "Hey, open this gate, and security guy's like, "No, I'm not going to open this gate." And so this is where we get some more backstory on Curtis.
Yeah, he's like telling. So basically, he tells the story of shortly after they first got on there. They made it a couple of weeks until they had to start eating the weak people.
Yeah.
And
so
he was telling a story of he
talks about how like
he knows what humans taste like, and he knows
that babies taste the best.
Exactly, and
that kills him inside.
Yeah, but the real thing is that he tells a story of a man who was trying to kill one of the children to eat it, and another man showed up and said
he ends up killing the mother.
Yeah,
and then the man shows up and cuts off his own arm and says, "Eat this. Spare the child."
And he reveals that man was Gilliam, and the man with the knife was Curtis.
And that
himself.
The baby he was trying to eat was
Edgar. Yeah, and it's rough. But Chris Evans nails it.
Yeah, and this is something that is very good, or where we forgot to mention it earlier, where Gilliam and Curtis are talking to each other, and Gilliam's trying to tell him that he's a leader, and Curtis says, "How can I be a leader when I still have two arms?"
Yeah, he said a lot of people have. He said people just started cutting off limbs.
People started cutting off limbs, and so he said, so it's kind of like it's either you cut your own limb off to help other people, or you tried to fight back and they took your arm away. And so it's either one of those two things, and he's done neither.
But it was established earlier he has a scar on his arm
where he tried to cut his arm.
Tried to do it and he couldn't do it.
And then Gilliam says something that's like, "It's better to hold a woman with two arms," or something.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like a passing thing, but it actually ends up being important. But anyways, so back to this. He tells the story, and he talks about how like he doesn't want to have to do that ever again, and he wants to be better than what he used to be, and all that stuff.
And he says, "So please open the gate." And he says, like, "I don't want to open that gate. I want to open that one." And he points to a door that leads outside the drain. And he says, "I ain't a junkie. I've been collecting this chronal because you can pack it together like C4.
He's like, "I just happened to get addicted along the way."
Yeah, and he says that every year he has checked that plane, and every year, for a while only part of it was visible, but now he could see the whole thing. The snow is melting.
Yeah, and he also mentions earlier whenever they're in the classroom car, they mention that they're passing an area where the first rebellion happened, where 7 people tried to run out of the train while it was still moving, and you can still see their frozen bodies walking away. And he mentions how he knew the woman in the front of that group, who he said was an Inuit.
Oh, yeah.
Who taught him the different types of snow.
And he can identify snow that it's about to melt. And
whenever the snow falls into the window and he looks at it, he says that snow is he identifies the type of snow. He knows that now is the right time they can survive outside now.
So now we've got an issue because our hero wants to get in the front, and the guy who was supposed to help him is like, "No, we can just leave."
And so he packs the C4 onto the door, the outside door, and right as he does, the front gate opens. The woman who stole the children earlier comes out, shoots him, and invites Curtis inside.
And this is what I call the Matrix Reloaded scene, because it's basically the same exact twist. But Wilfred's in there. And it's Ed Harris.
In a bathrobe.
I love Ed Harris. And it's like, it looks like someone's den. Like, there's like, the lights real low, and he's got like a desk and stuff.
And he's got some bookshelves and everything.
He's got a little stove.
Yeah, he's sitting there in a bathrobe cooking up some steak.
Yes. And this is where it's revealed that he was the guy sending the notes to him. He was planning this whole revolution. He had planned the other two. And that it's all about keeping the population under control.
Yeah.
If he can motivate them to revolt, they can be killed, population goes down. And he wants to kill 75% of the tail section.
And this is also after he reveals that, and they have a little bit of a discussion about that. He mentions that Gilliam understood this, and then he asks if the number is still the same, which it is. He pushes a panel that looks very much like a panel from Gilliam's room. It transforms into a phone. He picks it up. We cut back to the end of the car in Gilliam's room, where Egghead picks up the phone, and you can see in the background the entire tail section is all on their knees. He says 75%, and then he points the phone at Curtis, and he just hears gunshots.
Yes, but it's very much like in The Matrix Reloaded.
Yeah,
where the architect, with all of his ergo vis-a-vis concordantly, that's from the Will Ferrell one, where he just starts saying the big words, where it's revealed that the one Neo was created specifically to lead a revolution, and that revolution always ends with Zion being purged. So maybe Bong Joon-Ho is a big fan of The Matrix Reloaded.
but yeah, so
It's the same thing though, and I love that it's a fun twist because it's not satisfying. It makes you feel bad.
It makes you feel real bad, and it's like he was like, we didn't have to kill all these people because the revolution started to go well, but then you killed too many of the people from the front, so we had to kill them. And he was like, and the goal was for you to get to the water place and just go back. But Gilliam turned on Ed Harris, and was like, you can keep going. And so that's why Gilliam had to die.
Yeah, and if we're going with the Matrix, that makes Gilliam the Oracle.
Yes.
Where supposed to be part of the plan, but at one point just goes, not really. So a mixture of the Oracle and Smith. Where Smith was also like part of the program, and he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something new. But it's a lot to take in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
And they really kind of let it breathe. There's periods of like silence where nobody's talking as like Curtis is trying to process this. But basically he's like, I wanted you to come up to the front of the train because I need someone to take my place. I'm getting old. And I want that to be you, Curtis.
And at the same time this is happening, all the people from all the nightclub cars and everything who had their chronal stolen from them and everything run up, and they're in the car immediately behind them, coming to fight the security guy, because it's supposed to be one of two things: that they're just pissed because he stole their drugs, but also a little bit of it is that they're kind of inspired by the fact that Curtis was able to get all the way to the front.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of, he also inspired the people to come revolt on their own. And so at this point he needs some matches to light the chronal. And so he has his daughter, he tells his daughter how to open the door, and he has he has to fight off a bunch of people as they walk across the bridge, the tiny ass bridge.
It's like funneled into it.
Exactly. And so, but then he has Ed Harris has Curtis go to the front of the car and just stand there, and he has him just consider taking his place.
And this is where he realizes what happened to those children.
Well, first of all, it makes you think for a second that maybe he's like considering it. You think he might actually do it, and then
Neo may just go to the source.
The daughter opens the door, comes in, and she takes the matches, and then I think this is the one part at the end where she actually might be clairvoyant, where she stops and then gets down on her knees and starts like poking around at the floor. And Curtis gets down, and they open up a panel to reveal the engine, and you see Octavia Spencer's son fucking around with the engine. And this is the point where Ed Harris says that everybody has their purpose, and he does the same hand gesture, and you see the little boy down in the engine doing the exact same hand gesture.
Yeah, it feels like, I think there's like parts that went out, and instead of replacing them, because they can't, they stick children in these little compartments to like, it looks like he's pulling out like exhaust.
Yeah.
Like waste.
Yeah, and so this is where Curtis, who might have been considering taking the place and continuing the train, is like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to enslave these children. And it's also revealed that this became the reason why before this, the back end didn't really have much of a purpose, but he says that eventually it just became the reason we kept the rear going is so that they could make children so that they could work in the engine.
Yeah, because you're not going to take a nice child out of the school car.
No.
That'd be cruel. It's rough.
But yeah.
His logic for everything is like so... Because you just want to scream at him like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Why are, like, these people are living these horrible lives, and you're just like, we have to have them because we can steal their kids every once in a while.
This is like, and that's their purpose. Their purpose is to live shitty lives so that we can have this closed ecosystem. It's
yeah.
like, what the fuck?
It's like, we aren't deer. Like, that's the thing that happens where, like, you have to control the population of, like, animals. But these are people, and it seems like they have enough to go around at least to, like, give a little bit of something to the tail section, but he's so obsessed with everything being where it needs to be that it's like he can't even comprehend a different way. And
so this is where we get to the real point of the movie, really. Like, before it was just a simple, class system. It's like, this is bullshit, this is bad, this isn't good, we're not going to do this anymore. And so that was but it comes to the real premise of the movie, which is, like, the real decision, which is, this is how humanity has to survive, with the children working the engine and the people in the back being enslaved and everything. And it becomes a question of,
let the cycle continue,
or
break the cycle.
Exactly. If this is what is required to keep humanity going, is it worth it to keep humanity going?
Yeah. Oh, so we got two things that happen at the end, where he's got the little kid in the container, and he gets the one out. The other one's under the floor, and there's a massive gear turning. And so he reaches his arm in and stops the gear with his arm, pulls the kid out, and he finally gets to lose that arm.
He becomes a leader because he
lost the arm.
He lost the arm.
But then it doesn't matter, because now the girl has decided, Yona has decided, I'm going to blow this thing.
Yeah, she takes the match, she lights the chronal, she runs back into the front of the car, and then the dad, security man, walks in, attempts to close the door. The door's broken, And so instead, he and Curtis just use their bodies as a shield to protect his daughter and Octavia Spencer's son. And the explosion goes off, kills Ed Harris and Curtis and security man, causes an avalanche that derails the train. And so everybody is dead except for, what's her name? Yona and
the kid.
I can't remember
What's the kid's
his
name?
Temmie.
And then they walk out into the snow and they see a polar bear, and the movie's over.
Yep.
And you're like, yikes. But I don't think the movie's saying something. I think it's asking.
Yeah.
Is this kind of system worth it? Is it better to have this kind of inequality where people are suffering and they're stuck there and there's no possibility of moving upward? They're treated like garbage and second-class citizens, while others are allowed to thrive. And that is it worth it, or is it better off to have nothing than to have a system like that? And then you start to apply it to real life and get real depressed.
Yeah, but man, that's just...
It's a lot to swallow. It's a big pill.
It's tough. It's a rough movie at the end.
Yeah, but I don't think... I think Parasite has a very similar sort of theme to it. I think it does it a little bit better. Because this movie still has to be like a fun action movie.
Yeah.
And it sort of feels like his first attempt at covering that sort of story, that kind of theme. Most of his movies have that sort of theme. Like Okja's a lot about cruelty to animals.
Yeah.
And how capitalism profits off of
he's very
brutality.
Anti-capitalistic, anti-class, and all that stuff. Class inequality and stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to hear him describe his movies more. He's a little bit quiet in terms of that. He's not like Quentin Tarantino, who will go do like 5 million interviews.
Yeah.
Bong Joon-Ho is kind of a quiet man. But I'd love to sit in a room with him and talk about Snowpiercer and Parasite.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Get an idea of what
his perspective.
He's thinking. But yeah, so this movie is... I mean, it was hard for us to describe a little bit. What we did. I'm going to have to do a lot of cuts. But that's because there's so much crammed into 2 hours. There's so many different ideas and themes going on. And, I mean, there's also the idea of, like, sacrifice, where, Chris Evans feels regret for not having cut his own limb off.
Yeah, and so it's a weird thing of, like, how much do you have to give up for something? And it's like, if you don't give something up, are you not worth, like, yeah.
Yeah, what are you willing to sacrifice to help the people around you? And to the answer from the tail section is a lot. They're willing to give up a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe even their lives. And the answer from the front end is absolutely fucking nothing.
It's the answer from the front end is the tail section.
Yeah. Other people.
Exactly.
Because I even think it's worse because you see these rooms full of people living their lives, and they probably have never even thought about the tail section before.
Nope.
They might turn on the news or read a newspaper every once in a while, and something bad happened in the tail section, and they just go, man, glad that's not me. But that's probably the extent of it. Meanwhile, all these people in the tail section know is hardship and pain and loss and sacrifice. And I think Curtis is a great character because he sort of regrets fueling the system in the way he did and not giving the sacrifice that he really should have to help the people around him. And I think that's why his mind has changed so much by realizing that kids are locked up in there and being used as slaves. And it's not made clear, but it's kind of implied that the kids ain't gonna come back.
No.
They're gonna work until they're dead, and then they'll just go take 2 more kids.
Because they would have known about the kids if they had brought them back, if that's what they did. And
I also like the casting of Ed Harris because he's very good at this sort of thing.
he's good at just doing the monologue.
Because he's talking and he's explaining it in a way that you kind of want to be on his side.
Exactly. He's very good at...
Like, please explain this to me, Ed Harris, in a way that makes it make sense.
He's very good at portraying the bad guy who will get you on his side.
Yes. We're going to get to... It's in the hat. There's another movie with Ed Harris in it.
Ooh,
and
I love him.
He's real good. He's in it way more. Man, with him in Westworld and Snowpiercer at like the same time, basically.
Really good in Westworld.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just every actor's great in this movie. We've got the guy from Parasite who plays
Security Man.
Security Man.
I like how that's just what his name has become.
Yeah. And he's great. Octavia Spencer's great.
Yeah.
Chris Evans, he got screwed a little bit by Captain America because everybody sees him as Captain America, but they forget that like he's a good actor in this movie.
Yeah, he got a little bit Christopher Reeves.
Yeah.
Only seen as Superman, or in this case Captain America, but I feel like he's really good in this movie.
Yeah, and then with this movie and Knives Out, I think that he's going to have a good post Captain America career.
I think Knives Out especially with him being the bad guy.
Yeah.
I think that one will really shift people's
a goofy bad guy.
He's really good. I love him.
With his sweater.
Just the shitty rich person bad guy.
Yeah.
But there's crap. I'm blanking on her first name. Pregnant teacher Pill.
Allison Pill.
Allison Pill. I wasn't sure if
for
Allison
her one
was right.
scene.
For her one scene, I love her. She's not in enough.
Yeah, she was recently in Star Trek Picard.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just this movie. I've seen it like 5 times now, and it's just. It always leaves you thinking about things, and sort of like, if this happened in real life, like, would there be a way to run this train without that? Because Ed Harris makes a good case, because he's Ed Harris, and you want to believe what he says. But then at the same time, you have to wonder, like, is it even worth trying? Maybe just let it die. If it's that bad, it's not worth it.
It's not worth saving humanity if you have to do this to save humanity.
Yeah, but there's also we don't really know how many tail end people there are compared to how many people there are in the front.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly how everything works, but it seems like it's just maybe at the initial point they let too many people on the train. The ones who got on last were just stuck in the back. And it's like, what do? We don't have enough. And then they just continued to build it around that idea.
Yeah.
Where the people in the back, we don't have enough. And so, yeah, it doesn't seem like anyone's had any, like, straight up malicious plans for that. It was just a side effect of the way it happened. People got comfortable with the way things were, and they just forgot about all these people back there. And then it just became what it is. And that's the kind of stuff you start thinking about. Where it's like, how did it get to this situation? Why did it get in this situation? Is there any way to justify the situation? And honestly, no, there's not.
And I think the weirdest thing about this and the entire situation is that John Hurt Gilliam, it was partially his idea, and for 17 years he lived with the people in the back. He sacrificed literally an arm and a leg, and he still kept going with the plan. He still kept sending people to die in the revolutions and all that stuff. And it wasn't until Curtis, he saw him leading during the fight, that he was like, okay, maybe this isn't a great idea. But the fact that he went along with it for 17 years, and he was like buddy with Ed Harris.
Well, I think it's because if he didn't participate in it, in like the whole plan, then they could just like cut off their food, or if all the tail people died, they'd just find more tail people. Like, it's just I think he looked at it as like an inevitability, where it's like, this is just how it has to be. Either no one lives in the tail section, or every few years a bunch of them get killed.
Yeah.
And yeah, my one criticism of the movie is I don't feel like it explores these ideas well enough. You're left making up your own sort of excuses and explanations for things, as opposed to Parasite, which I feel like really gives its ideas room to breathe.
I feel like part of that is, first of all, there's like the extra bits of like the action scenes takes up time, but also the movie takes a lot of time just setting up the world.
Yeah.
So you spend a lot more time with world building, so you can't really dive quite into the actual interpersonal parts of it. And so, as opposed to Parasite, where it's just South Korea, it's, you understand how it works.
Yeah.
Throws you into what the characters are doing.
Yeah, so I think it's just the movie's got a little bit too many ideas, not enough time.
Yeah.
As opposed to Parasite, which is like 2.5 hours long, and it really is able to slowly drip feed everything, so that you understand everything as it's happening, and then so when things get crazy at the end, you sort of understand
exactly
everybody's point of view. Where in this movie, you really only get Ed Harris's point of view when it comes to the actual hierarchy and structure of things.
Yeah. One thing I do like,
because Curtis is so all he can think about is his situation and the people in the back, but Ed Harris sees the bigger picture. But so you see his ideas more than
it also doesn't help. Well, I'm not sure how I feel about this, because I do like the part where he goes up to the front and it just sits there on Chris Evans' face. He does not say anything about what he's thinking about, so you don't really get that. You don't get the stuff going on inside his head. But one thing I do really like about that is he's really good at just standing there, and without saying anything or moving at all, you know that he is thinking, and he is just going over everything in his head, and his world is coming crashing down, and he's having to reconstruct everything in his head.
Yeah, a lot of this movie is just him processing things.
Exactly. And he's very good at portraying that in his face, that he's trying to process what is happening.
Yeah, so overall, let's see. What would you give it out of 5?
Out of 5? I'd go with 4 out of 5.
I would probably...
Are we doing 0.5s in this system?
No.
Okay, 4 out of 5.
I'd probably give it a 4 out of 5 as well.
Yeah, I would, if there were 0.5s, it would be 3 point, but 4.
Yeah, I feel like if it was... I could watch another half hour of this movie, and I have a feeling that he probably wrote it to be a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So we kind of got... we're shown a lot about the tail end, but not... Other than Curtis, nobody really talks about it. We just kind of see it.
Exactly, yeah.
So it would have been better if maybe there was another character who could kind of explain in more detail how the whole train situation works. We're told it's an ecosystem and the population matters, but we don't know a lot about the middle and front ends sort of
and
perspective.
One thing I really would have liked to hear about more, but I completely understand why we don't, would be Gillian's perspective on it. about his own reasoning for it, but I understand why, because you need to have him die before you know about what he was actually like.
Yeah.
So I understand not, but I am interested by what his actual feelings about the train were and like everything.
Yeah, so this will be fun to edit because I'm going to have to really cut, because there's a lot of times where we're like, we've got to think for a second.
It's like, what part are we at?
Because it's just, that's what it is. It's just so much crammed into only 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that's really why it gets 4 instead of 5. Because Parasite is a 5.
Yeah.
Definitely. So it's time for
The hat.
drawing one out of the hat. And I kind of got them in here so they don't stick together. So let's see what we get. For next week, we have
My Neighbor Totoro.
My Neighbor Totoro. All right. We get to cry together.
Fun.
So, next week will be My Neighbor Totoro from Hayao Miyazaki, and it is available on HBO Max if you want to stream it. And so, look forward to that one. Man, we've had the first 3 just vastly different movies.
Yeah.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Snowpiercer, My Neighbor Totoro.
Which I think is good. I think it's good to be diverse in our...
Yeah, I would have obviously put for the first Ghibli movie, Spirited Away, but we already watched that.
We did not. Oh wait, Spirited Away?
Yeah.
Yes, we did watch that.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was thinking of a different one.
Another movie with a train in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so My Neighbor Totoro's
I was thinking of...
really, really good, really cute. A lot to talk about with it. Because it's pretty weird.
Yeah.
All of his movies are weird. So yeah, you have next week we will be doing My Neighbor Totoro, and we will catch you next time.